Hi everyone, and welcome to another RavenDB episode this time with Rob Eisenberg. I've known Rob for I think 4 or 5 years, something like that, Rob.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
I think that the first time was at the client side, and then we worked on the Environment Profiler for a time, and we even did some of the work on some of the first drafts of the RavenDB Management Studio. But this is actually what we are here to talk about with you today. So we're now to talk about RPGWithMe, and this is your new startup, and it appears that it's using RavenDB. So without further ado, tell us what it is, what it does.
All right. Well, one of my favorite pastime activities is playing tabletop role-playing games with friends.
You're a geek.
Yeah, all the way through. So
Yeah. Says the kettle to the pot.
right. But I started looking around at technology related to tabletop role-playing games, and I was pretty underwhelmed by what I saw. So I started thinking about naturally being a software developer. Could I build something, and what would that be? And so I started to put together RPGWithMe. That was about a year ago. And so what I ended up building was sort of an integrated suite of tools for tabletop role-playing games that are designed for both players and for game masters. And I'll just kind of take you through the site and maybe show you what a few of those different features are and how they work. But everything's web-based, so you can check it out yourself at RPGWithMe.com, and you can create an account for free. There's free accounts, and then there's a subscription-based model for what I call the heroic plan. But basically, here we are at the home page. It's a fairly typical home page with some banner and marketing stuff, and then we have different people's characters and campaigns that they're playing in.
Okay. So if I want to play, I'm going here, and basically this website is going to sell instead of the notebooks, instead of keeping all of those codes by hand. Rob?
Tabletop role-playing game, PC or console role-playing games, you just point and then assume the role of that character throughout the game. So the first piece that I created was an online interactive character sheet. Most people do this with paper and pencil, but I thought it would be great to have a web-based character sheet that you could interact with, where we would basically store all of your stat changes and all that information in the cloud. And I wanted to build it with HTML with tablets in mind, so that you could take an iPad or Windows 8 tablet or something like that to your regular game and sit around the game table, and instead of scratching things and erasing with pencil or dry erase markers or whatever, you could just sit there on your tablet and have all your information in one place, be able to do all your rolls with just a single touch, and be able to easily edit any of the stats that you need to edit during gameplay. So this right here on the screen is a Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. And you can see that you've got basic hit points and your typical stats and skills. And for example, you can just click, or if you're using a tablet, you can just touch any of these things to perform the associated die rolls. If you need to edit something like this is action points, you can just click or touch on that and very easily modify the value. We pull in all kinds of information about your character. So this is a very rich information source. So different games have powers or feats or spells or different things depending on what your character is. So we can show you all that information and easily let you perform any roles associated with that. So this is the first piece that I wanted to create.
This looks
Just
beautiful.
a nice.
Well,
Thank you.
I know that
I really wanted
to
to make something nice.
Yeah, I know that basically everyone here is going to want to talk about RavenDB at some point, but this just looks beautiful.
Thank you. As I was looking around at what was out there, I was most things were, there were some things that looked decent, but most things looked pretty horrible, to be honest, in terms of the web presence of different technologies. And so I felt from the beginning it would be worth it to invest in spending a little bit of money to have a good designer basically work with me on this to make it look nice. Especially since this is game oriented, I felt the visual appearance was all the more important as an aspect of that. So from the RavenDB perspective of this particular feature, the cool thing is that this is just a document, you know. The entire, it's actually split into two documents for optimization reasons, but the static information that changes very slowly over long periods of time, you know, with very long intervals, is sort of in one document. That's things like your skills and your abilities. Those tend to only change when you level up, which only happens. You know, some game systems it happens every time you meet, but if you're meeting once a week, so you think that data changes once a week. But other things like hit points change multiple times throughout a gameplay session. So that's stored in a separate document. But using things like RavenDB includes, it's still, you know, one simple query to the database to pull up every single piece of information that we need to construct this entire screen. And it's always loaded together, and that with the exception of the state that, like the rapidly changing hit points, I can load that up by itself when I need to change those values. But when you load this character sheet up, everything is pretty much always loaded together because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to.
Yeah, you're actually running. I didn't actually look at the URL, but you're actually running against the live production site right now. So
I am right now.
The speed that we're actually talking about is actually in production. Right?
Yes, you can browse to this URL and see the same sheet that I'm looking at right now. This is actually one of my characters in a play-by-post game that I'm playing, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. But with the site, you can make your character sheet public or private. So I like to keep my stuff public because I think it's fun. So anyone that's watching can browse to this URL and take a peek at it. You won't be able to edit, you know, my hit points, but you'll be able to see all the information. So
yeah, I think that I have a feature request. When I'm playing against you, I want to be able to edit your hit points. Your hit points.
Right.
Yeah, that would be a short way to win. Did you ever at some point have this running on SQL Server?
No, I never. From the get-go, I had the idea that a document database would make a lot more sense for the kind of things that I wanted to do, and I'll show you a few other things that work very elegantly. But
I'm looking at the amount of details that you have for this page, and I'm trying.
I don't think it could even be done with a relational database. I mean, you would probably end up with some
enough
sort of
queries,
XML
you can
field.
do a lot. Yeah, but yeah, I'm just thinking, like, look at the abilities or the skill or the senses, and each of them would have to sit on a different tables, and you have. I assume that you have more data behind the scenes than what we just see here.
Yes, like if you click on one of these powers, you can see all the information there. And what's interesting even more, if you click on, this isn't really a weapon, but this is like a holy symbol. If you click on it, though, then you can see all the information about that.
Yeah.
And if you dig into things like, you know, there's information on feats. Well, let's see, for example, this is a human, a cleric, so you can click on human, and you can read all the information about humans. So there's just a ton of information in here, and generally what you want to do, especially if you're playing in person on a tablet, is you want to be able to load all that information up on your tablet and only need to ever hit the server again for updates to things like hit points or action points, and there's only a very small number of things that need to change during a game session like that. So you're really just pushing, more or less, it's like an asynchronous command that you just post to the server to update something, and you never need to get any additional information to play from that point on. So the document database really, for this feature in particular, worked very nicely, because otherwise, I mean, trying to split all this up into different tables would have been a nightmare of a query situation to try and pull this back. But aside from that, I think what most people probably would have done is they would have ended up sort of hoisting a quasi-document database on top of SQL Server anyways. They would have, you know, had some information in some table fields and then shoved the blob of XML into something else.
It's so fun, especially when you need to query that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not bitter at all for there's so many projects that I have to do it over and over again.
Yeah, so it was a very natural fit for this, especially since, you know, historically, it literally has been a physical document in a sense, you know, a physical piece of paper or collection of pieces of paper where all this information was there in this one physical package. So it made sense to model it something like that in this case. And like I said, I did make some modifications to splitting it up into two documents. That was basically based off of, you know, the data that was changing at one rate of time, so to speak, versus the data that was changing at another rate of time.
Okay.
With certain state data changes very quickly, and the other data changes, relatively speaking, extremely slowly.
That also allows you to take advantage of things like caching.
Yep.
And just, you know, the nature of splitting things based on their transactional behavior is one of the core concepts, I think, of actually modeling properly with RavenDB.
Yep. And there's a lot more that, you know, I just launched, and there's a lot to this, and there's definitely some things that that when I was modeling it in certain ways, I was I didn't have time to implement certain usages of RavenDB features, but I modeled it in such a way that I could come back and refactor to optimize certain things like that. So, but yeah, so this is one of the major features that people like, and on this one I made, it's completely free. So if you have a free account, if you play one of the games that I support, you can basically import a file from a couple of known tools, and I generate this completely interactive interface. And it's this is how I actually play tabletop games now. So I take an iPad with me to the table, and I just do everything from the iPad. And I actually ended up getting several tablets to test on with this. So now a lot of my friends that don't have tablets, I bring them tablets to play on, because they prefer this over the paper. And the cool thing is that, you know, I've got all the data stored, right? So there's no need to worry about forgetting it or losing it or.
So in other words,
like
you started up a business for the sole purpose of being able to get a lot of tablets.
That's right.
Yeah. It's not that I want to. I have to buy this tablet.
That's what I told my wife, at least.
Okay. So let's see. What more are you doing with RavenDB in this?
So there's a bunch of other things on the site. I can show you another piece that makes that was a really good fit for a document database. So we don't just support the character sheets that you can play at the table, but we also let you play your games online through the site. We have a virtual tabletop which you can all get online together and basically play in real time over the internet. And we also have something called Play by Post, which is a bit like chess by mail. So if you can't all get together at the same time, you can sort of make your move, asynchronously. You can each make your move or do your actions when you have time. And actually, a lot of people play that way now. This was the other thing that I really wanted to implement, because everybody that plays that way just uses a modified forum. Basically, somebody took some open source forum, they hack a die rolling engine into it, and then they say, hey, come play. But I wanted to have a much more game-like and integrated experience. So once I had the character sheets, I wanted to integrate the character sheets into that kind of experience and into the virtual tabletop. And with RavenDB, we were able to do a couple of really cool things. So I'll show you.
Okay. Yeah.
I will show you the adventure that my character Elaine that I just showed you is actually playing in this campaign, which is called the Adventurers Guild that a friend of mine is running. And this is just the home page, but we can jump into the virtual table. And I'll bring that up.
Oh.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
So, and everything on here is user-generated content. So I'm not really demoing right now the Game Master features, but he's come in here and he's basically pulled in the images he wanted and set up a mat and set up his enemies and different things like that, and easily dropped in the player tokens. And before we started this, I actually made so this is a play-by-post game, so I make like one move a day basically. And if you look at the activity history here, you can see these three things that I basically did, and then the Game Master responded. But the cool thing about this is that this map that you're seeing is a lot of structured data, and it's always loaded together. So once again, it's a series of layers. Let me actually show you. A different map so I can show you more structurally what's happening here. This is just a demo map I made for the convention that I went to. And if I jump into the edit mode, you'll see that it's actually structured as a series of layers, background color, background images.
You just
the images have
Photoshop in HTML5?
Not quite, but there's a number of similar things like that, yeah. But grid, and then you've got tokens, and all your tokens have properties on them that you affect the visual appearance of. Also, all the enemies as a game master, I can see, I can set up information to track on them if I want to track their hit points or their powers and do things like that. So there's a ton of information here.
Yeah, can we look at, is this a single document behind this or a set of documents?
This particular scene right here, it's literally it's a class called scene. Yeah, so it's a single document that represents the state of the game table. Yeah. Can
we look at that? I mean, just look. I would really like to see the documents that is powering that team.
Sure. So here it is. It's called scene, and there's some reference type stuff that you would expect in a denormalization type things. This is another complex object that stores all the information about the initiative order, right? So
I'm sorry, you have the class called Fog of War.
That's what's awesome about this, yeah. Fog of War defines a series of zones that the game master can set up that hide or show areas of the screen to the players. So they can have a large map up there that maybe they don't want the players to be able to see everything yet, and this represents the information about how to basically carve that up.
How long were you working on something like that?
How long was I working on this?
Yeah, on this.
And modeling this document?
I mean,
I don't know. The virtual tabletop is actually the bulk of the work for the virtual tabletop is in the JavaScript side, And the thing that's been great about
this really makes me happy for a totally different reason. Guys, anyone who listens here, try to think about doing this without Raven.
Yeah, I try not to think like that.
I'm freaking out in the number of the level of complexity that you just have here. And
right.
I
And
don't
the
think
cool
that we,
thing
yeah.
is, I love the ability to do something like this. You see that my layers, I actually
Mhm.
don't have those modeled at all in C# because I really don't care what each layer type has its own model, and I'd never
Mhm.
needed to interact with those layers on the server side. They're completely for uh,
Client-side
you know
JavaScript.
yeah. So just having them as JavaScript objects like that was great. And there actually there is a few places where I need to interact with them, but I can use
Dynamic or
the yeah,
the,
I can use the JObject APIs to do what I need to do because it's pretty
mhm.
simple. But things like tokens, which represent, and just have a look at token, um, it that represents a player's token or an enemy's token on the game board. Things like that are need to be interacted with on the server at
Mhm.
times. But yeah, it's a rich structure of data, and um, again, without a document database, um, you'd probably end up making something like a document database on
Yeah, I
top of
don't.
SQL.
We have tons of customers like that that basically end up having to roll their own if they don't use Raven. And I think that we have a question from Kanja or Janja, and no, he just saying no kidding. But I think he's talking about the complexity of doing something like that without Raven. Okay,
Right, and
so
it was effortless with Raven. I mean, there was really nothing to think about. I just decided what was the optimum model for, or what made sense how to model this tabletop here,
mhm.
and I didn't really think about Raven.
And he just walked.
Right, right. And it's really changed the way I mean, because I have been scarcely working at all with relational technologies for the last 2 years. Most of my
Mhm.
work has been one way or another with Raven, and it's really, at first it was a brain twister to start thinking right way
Mhm.
about using it, but now I guess I think that way a lot more naturally, and I found out that it makes a lot more sense. The way that you have to think in order to use Raven correctly tends to push you towards actually developing your application more correctly.
Yeah,
In general, I think a
yeah,
lot more about concurrency. Like, I never even really thought a whole lot about things like that before, but with the document structures and how I decided to break things out, I think about things like concurrency, or I think about you know a rate of change of different types of information, and things that I didn't really think about when I was using a relational database. Maybe I was just not very good. Probably
no,
wasn't very
I will tell
good,
you what.
but
Let me tell you what happens when you use a relational database. You generally don't think about it. You go to production, your application dies, then you have these 3 months of no sleep while you try to fix everything, and you don't have the time to actually, you know, do anything else except fix all the bugs that you've just uh, learned about, such as, oh, we
right,
now have a hotspot in the database, and that's going to kill the application, or we have a page that is generated, and usually the most important pages, we have a page that's generating 15,000 queries to the database. Those are
oh
real
yeah,
number in productions that I've seen time and time again, and that's how most people spend the quarter after going to production for the first time, just tweaking and learning all about the inner details of their database of
right,
choice just to get it working. Uh,
right.
and yeah, you're absolutely right that there are actually some things here that I'm very happy to hear, because we have tried very hard to go and make RavenDB um, a safe by default choice to guide you into the speed of success that you go and it works and you don't really have to think too much about it. And I think that you touch a really important point when you said that the modeling concerns is probably where you get tremendous amount of value from using RavenDB. But I'm actually more interested in what else are you doing? So you're doing the RavenDB modeling. What other fun stuff are you doing with RavenDB? Not for the so right now I'm not talking about your users. I'm talking about everyone who gathered here today to just
Yep.
see the geek us out, basically.
Yeah, so let me show you. I'm not using a lot of super advanced things, but one thing that I was just when I started working with RavenDB, this feature didn't exist, and I think it came out of some discussions on the forums about different things a few people were trying to do. But so one thing that I really love is the multi-map. And for example, I implemented a very basic site-wide search using multi-map, and this uses a couple of different of the search and query capabilities kind of mixed together. So one thing is the multi-map, which lets me basically, as you know, bring in multiple entities. So I have users, characters, and campaigns, which are kind of the three big things you would be searching for on the site. You know, either want to find a buddy to invite them to a game, or you want to find a particular character or a particular game. And using multi-map, I was able to map this into a structure that I could use to query across all the data, all those three entities very easily with my site-wide search. So that's.
Can you go down a bit?
That's this. Hold on just a second.
Yeah.
That's this thing right here, more or less.
And wait a second. If I'm searching for something like this, I'm actually going to get campaigns or characters or users, basically everything that I get, right?
Yep.
Okay. Question. Interesting question.
I can refine it by type as well in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I really liked is, here's the actual query. It's really simple right now. I have plans to do some more intelligent things with it, but just the ability to say search it was really nice, because for different entities I was able to select different properties of the entity that I thought were the most interesting things that people would want to be searching on.
And one comment that I had, I don't think that you need a reduce in here. I think that you can do it without, because you're reducing on the ID, and it looks like every document is going to have a different ID.
So you don't think I need this? No, yeah, every document will. So you don't think I need this at all?
No. I think that what you're using the reduce for is to specify that all of those fields should be stored. But that's a different problem set and that's more easier to do without doing a reduce.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Awesome.
So that just was cool, because the multi-map was really nice. That got added somewhere along the way as I was developing this, and as soon as that was there, I took advantage of it.
Yeah.
And then that also, just the easy searching and the ability to do the analyzed field against different properties. It just made something like this trivial, basically, to set up. Okay. And there's a couple other things that are similar in nature to this. One feature that I use a lot is I don't use it a lot, but to the degree that I could, most screens are focused around a single document, but like in the example of the character sheet, that's two different documents, but using includes, those can be easily fetched with a single call to the database. And by using a combination of includes with the lazy function, basically, basically like the advanced.lazy. I'm pretty much every page in this app. Like three round trips to the database is a lot in this app. Most pages I was able to more or less optimize to one or two at most round trips. Most of them are one.
Awesome.
So that was really nice, and I worked within Hibernate for a while before this, so I was familiar with how to, obviously obviously you're involved with that quite a bit.
Yeah.
So a lot of your learning from that became natural, I guess. out-of-the-box APIs with Raven. So doing things like, those two things where I was already kind of used to thinking about that, but having it right there was very nice. So I took advantage of that.
One of the things that
throughout.
we really tried how to do is to make sure that the right thing to do would also be the easiest thing, the easy thing to do. So
Right.
you can do some of those old things in a helmet, but it tends to be really, really, really hard to do.
Right.
So, okay. One last feature, keeping short, just one last feature, and then I want to talk about actually going to production. Okay?
Sure. I'll show you another aspect of the virtual table that was again a good fit for RavenDB. One of the things that I wanted to do was have a rich history of the things that happen in the game. Sometimes that's just text right here where you can see the game master is typing something or I'm typing something. But actually, that's a little bug right there. How about that? But one of the things that I wanted to be able to capture historically was if a character uses some power or some spell, I wanted to capture what they used at that point in time because characters often evolve over time. So I wanted people to be able to go back in time and read the story through and see things exactly as the way they were.
You use Fireball level 3, but now you have Fireball level 6, and you still want to see the 3 level. Yeah.
So every post in the activity feed is a document, and it captures, at the time that you post it, I snapshot various fragments of your character sheet and store it historically along with the post. So like this post right here by Elaine, if I click on this Turn Undead, you'll see the full details of that power that he used at that point in time. And then you can also see the die roll results, their final results plus the breakdown of the individual rolls.
Yeah.
So that was something that I really wanted to do. I wanted this rich information, but I didn't want to have a bunch of tables that I had to put together to bring back this one activity.
Is absolutely horrifyingly complex.
Right, and with these activity feeds, I page them in, but you're often bringing back at least 10 to 20 of these activities at a time, and they all have, not all of them, but several of them might have related information. So I wanted it to just be, it made sense to all store it together. Once it's stored, it's pretty much never ever changed again. So it made sense to capture it and to store it all together as a single unit, and then if I bring it down via Ajax or into the page or whatever, I have all the information right there together to display all the details about what happened. And so that was just another really nice fit for a document database, and people that generally people that are looking at the product because they want to play are seeing that, and nobody's doing anything remotely like that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
At anywhere. So there's all that kind of stuff, and it was trivially easy to do. So.
You have no idea how happy you make me when you say stuff like that. Okay, let's talk about, seriously, this is your baby, and it looks like you put a tremendous amount of effort and thought and love into this. And it looks just beautiful. And
thank you.
Yeah, so it's really, really, really nice. Let's talk about production. So we talked about this before, and if I remember correctly, everything is on the cloud, right?
Yes. Yep.
So usually going to production is this really, really scary 3 months of hell that you have to go through. So what was your production going live like?
It was pretty easy. I'm using so the core technologies that I'm using in terms of the cloud side of things are App Harbor, And they're of course built on Amazon, and I'm using a few of Amazon's things independent of that, like email sending and things like that. I'm using some queuing technologies as well that are cloud-based and different things like that. And of course, I'm using the RavenHQ. So, and I have a full staging environment in the cloud as well. So it's there was pretty much nothing to going to production. I was pretty much, once I had App Harbor set up, which I set up, like a year ago, when I very first started out down this path, and as soon as RavenHQ is available on App Harbor, I think I pretty much subscribed that day. So I wasn't actually testing up until that point, but it pretty much worked seamlessly once I figured out how to get the connection string working. I think there was some issues initially with App Harbor and the Raven connection string, but that's old news. So that's all solved now. But after that, it was just a push to my staging site, and everything everything pretty much worked. And my regular workflow that I have now, is, now that I'm in production, it's pretty much the same as before I was in production. I mean, I have my own internal repositories that I push to, and usually whenever I push to my internal repository, I also do a push to my staging repository. So it goes immediately to staging, and then I usually push to production no more than once a day, but like yesterday I pushed to production about 6 to 8 times at least.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Coming back to the world of other people, where pushing to production is scheduled 3 months in advance.
I couldn't be competitive that way, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. I'm just thinking about, so you push to production once a day, several times a day. And what about schema changes? What about when you change something in the data structure? How do you handle that?
So far, everything that I've changed so far has been additive. So there's I don't even think about it, to be honest, because it just
okay.
It just works. As an example, that scene object, when I first released, the tabletop didn't have initiative, order for turn tracking, or the fog of war. But when I was ready to say implement fog of war, I just modeled that object and I just added the property on, and I was done. There was nothing to do but push it. But push the code, up to App Harbor, and it works,
Yeah, sorry, that's amazing. That's
another reason why I like RavenDB, to be honest, because I'm terrified of changing the database, and it makes me less terrified.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, there are still situations, that where you have to do some explicit work. I haven't had those come up yet, but in general, I love the fact that the sort of cases of extending the system don't really require any additional steps to make sure that the database is, that the database schema is updated or anything like that.
Yeah. What's the performance been like?
So, say that again?
So you went to production, and what was the performance like? You're running in the cloud, you're running on hosted RavenDB, everything is, so basically you're running into all of the fallacies of distributed computing all at once.
Right. Now the performance has actually been pretty good. I'm running two web workers right now, and 2 background workers as well. I have a number of things that I currently push off, as asynchronous tasks onto background servers. There's a lot more I could push that I'm not doing yet, but I haven't really needed to deal with that yet. Performance has generally been pretty good. One of the things that's great about the, for example, interacting with the character sheets, once you pull down that initial character sheet onto your tablet and you're playing at the game table, at that point in time, you don't, the user doesn't even perceive performance at all of the server, because everything at that point in time is just an asynchronous push to the server. So in that case, I sort of eliminate the perception, at least from their, from their end of that common gameplay scenario. So if things are, and that's an example where I could actually be using the queues, which I'm not, which would basically, obviously that's a very obvious kind of optimization. Right now it's not necessary, but at least there's no feedback that the server needs to give them when they do things on their character sheet. In fact, you wouldn't want to see any kind of real feedback, because that would interrupt your gameplay or your interaction with that.
I'm actually thinking about, you have several guys come in and do the game, and usually, sometimes you have actually good internet, but if you're in a conference or at the pub or something like that, and usually, you're on someone mobile Wi-Fi or something like that, and
right.
Just being able to do everything without going back and forth to the server, that will significantly improve just the experience of working with things.
Right.
We have a question from Juma Bhavani Sankar, which I probably just spelled your name, so I'm sorry. Were any of the changes that you made added properties included in any of the indexes, and how did you manage any indexes changes or rebuilds?
None of the things I've added so far were critical in any way to any kind of index or query. So I would probably be on the RavenDB forums and asking about that if I was going to do that, to be honest.
Okay.
But nothing that I have changed so far is related to those things.
Okay. And guys, we're coming to the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, this is now the time to post them. And while you're typing ahead all of the hard questions, what was hard or uncomfortable, or so we spoke about all of the things that were good. What was not good?
Well, in the beginning, not having that multi-map was not good, but that got fixed. I'm trying to think. About the things that I, in terms of looking at the whole picture. I had a couple issues with some things that changed a little bit with between different versions of Raven. I think where one of my queries didn't quite work right, but I think that issue was already fixed. And I had the other week when we were talking about which was really just a gap in my knowledge about indexes, where I had
you had a dynamic index that wasn't actually being very active, if I remember correctly, right?
Right, and as soon as I promoted those to auto, some of the strange behavior I had was just disappeared, actually. So and that was a case where we were getting views coming up that looked like they had stale data, basically.
Yeah, so the actual problem was that, just for everyone else, we had a dynamic object, a dynamic query that generated temporal index, and I think it was some rare part of the system. So it wasn't hit often enough to actually become a permanent index. And sometimes you would hit it for the first time after a while, and the index was dropped, and then we had to recreate it. And then you had the first load where you actually showed you some same information, and then the next load it would just work fine. And I think that the solution was just promoted to a standard index, so it wouldn't get deleted after a period of time where it was unused, and this just solved the problem.
Right. That was definitely the problem, and it was solved immediately. So, and it was happening in a couple of different places. So I did the same thing, and they were all fixed.
Right-click promote.
Right, right. I was like, this must be common enough. There's a nice little action here, so that was really easy to solve. But I haven't had a lot of huge problems. When I look at the grand scheme of things, the database side of it has been one of the least of my concerns. You know, the biggest technical challenge with this particular product, or one of the biggest, has been the cross-platform support, particularly with tablets.
Mm, yeah, sounds like it.
So that's definitely been a big challenge. I mean, everybody thinks that HTML5 is great if you have a modern browser and a modern tablet, but there's still a lot of voodoo that has to happen in order to make it work
Yeah, I'm
in
trying
certain
to
scenarios.
I'm trying to think about the nightmare of having to support i6 versus the nightmare of having to support, oh no, this is a Samsung Android 3.76 with the custom version of blah blah. Now it has to work on
Yeah.
that as well. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, unfortunately, all over again.
Yeah. Okay. We have a bunch of questions. One from Mark Henke. I think that's the right way of saying that. What sort of testing suite did you build around this?
I plead the fifth on that question.
I think that and I have no idea how he did it, but I think that the term that you're trying to do is you're so agile. You do the testing in production with live users. That's a nice way of putting that.
Right, right.
Okay, and we have another question from Jana. I'm sorry again for the name. How the messages shown here modeled? I may have missed this at the beginning, and I think he's talking about the messages
Oh, I
on
didn't
your
talk.
chat
I
sheet.
didn't talk about this particular piece. They're
Mhm.
just other it's a simple document basically. In fact, you can comment on these too, and the comments are stored with the message, which again another example of a really nice thing that was easy to do with Raven to optimize. Like this particular screen is, it's like basically 3 queries, but by using with the structures of the documents, both of these, the characters and campaigns are indexes, and they pull back with what's it called? They have like a reduce, so it pulls back only the information that is needed. Like this doesn't pull
Projection.
back the entire character sheet, right? It just pulls
Mhm.
back the 3 or 4 pieces of information I need to display that. So the characters and campaigns are specifically designed indexes, and then the messages is a document that structures the original message plus all comments together with it. And by doing that, loading all that together using lazy queries and the indexes, it's basically like one round trip to the database to build this screen.
Mhm.
And
And again,
I didn't really show the message object, but it's pretty simple.
yeah, no, I'm just thinking about, again, you're running head-on into the fallacies of distributed computing, and you just sidestep them. We have another question from Juma. How many document collections, entity types are you working with? Also, what collection sizes are you dealing with?
Let's see, how many document types do I have? It's probably about a dozen right now. Some of them are really simple things. There's a few that are larger, more intricate, like that scene that I showed you, like the character. The model for a campaign holds some significant structural data, but it's less than the other two. Number of collections, so we haven't been launched for very long, so there's not a ton of data in the system yet. The database size is somewhere around like 27 megabytes right now,
Yeah.
so it's not very large at all, but
The reason that I'm
activity.
laughing is that you're running on RavenHQ, and just to give you some numbers, my blog, which has close to a decade of history, is something like less than 150 megabytes. And
Right.
when we were building RavenHQ, we started doing some of the numbers there. We're actually being really efficient with this space. And that is even before so in 1.2 we also have compression bundle, so it be even more efficient than that. But it's just really, really funny when we start thinking about things in this fashion.
Right. Well, I mean, there's actually, when I showed you the rich activities when we're storing the role results and the power results and all that, I mean, that's probably the largest collection, but it's still relatively small. There's probably like 5,000 or 6,000 documents. Yeah.
Okay. Another question from Mark Henke. What sort of JavaScript libraries or extension did you use to achieve a lot of the functionality?
So I will show you. I actually open source part of it. If you check out this project Durandal that I have here.
Isn't that from Lord of the Rings?
I don't think it is, but it's a sword name from mythology.
Okay.
But basically, like the virtual tabletop, if you were in the call to see that, is the most significantly complicated piece of JavaScript, pieces of JavaScript, and the core foundation for that are three open source libraries: jQuery, Knockout.js, and Require.js. And what I did was I built a little framework on top of that, which I open sourced here on GitHub called Durandal, that basically brings, my other open source work is in Calibre Micro, and that's all around front-end architecture basically. And so what I did is I took some of the ideas from that and sort of layered them on top of those three frameworks to give a structure to building rich JavaScript applications. So more or less the entire tabletop is those three libraries plus Durandal that is built on top of them, and pretty much nothing else. Everything is written from scratch. Like the game table is all, the actual map surface is all written from scratch because it's that's sort of like my secret some of my secret technology, right? Because it's very different piece of that has to be designed a little bit differently for performance reasons on different devices, and the different layers render with different techniques and do different things like that. So that was all written, and the touch layer that abstracts mouse and touch is basically all written from scratch. And so there's a lot of things unique to that experience that I wrote, but the general application architecture is just built on top of those three libraries in Durandal. And you can check it out. I'll actually show you. I mean, you might find it interesting to see. I can't show you too much super secret stuff, but everything is, this is actually the tabletop right here, and everything is just structured as modules. This more or less the same way that you would build a XAML application. If you're building it with Calibre Micro, you have view models and views, and in my case, let me show you a different something down here maybe. Like in my case, the initiative for controlling turns is two files: initiative.js, which is basically the view model, and initiative.html. So everything is organized pretty much the same way that you would organize like a Calibre Micro application. That's what Durandal kind of lets you do. It has conventions built into it that it knows how to locate and bind those things, and it can compose complex views. Everything is pretty much handled in a compositional way. So that's how the tabletop is put together more or less. And then because it's built on Require.js, all those individual files are optimized down into a single download, including the HTML. So that all ends up being a single JS file that is dynamically downloaded and loaded in and run, and that's how the tabletop works. So
Okay.
it's a complex, as far as JavaScript goes, it's a pretty complex piece of
I would
code.
assume so. It looks like you spent a whole lot of time on that. Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, you're the only person I know who would build Photoshop on the web. Anyway, any final thoughts?
From me?
Yes.
No, as far as RavenDB goes, it's been a real pleasure to to work with it. I feel that it's a database that is an application-centric database. I feel that it just fits very naturally with writing software. I never felt that way with the relational database. I always felt like that was an afterthought in a sense. That, but I feel like RavenDB is really there to support building applications, and so it was it's pretty smooth, and combining that piece with what I can do with the cloud now in terms of something like App Harbor, where there's all these different service providers I can kind of plug in, like RavenHQ or IronMQ for queuing, and I can just sort of plug them together. The combination of those types of things basically made me extremely agile, and let me continue to be agile. I released new features this week. I released new features last week. I've done bug fixes both weeks, and I'm releasing. I don't release necessarily every day, but just about every other day with some kind of tweak or fix or new feature or something like that. So that makes a huge difference with what I'm trying to do, because there's some slight competition in various aspects of what I'm doing. No one really puts all the pieces together the way that I do, but so I'm continually expanding the feature set or the richness of the virtual tabletop, or doing different things like that in order to stay competitive and give tremendous, as much value as possible to my paying customers.
Okay.
So it lets me do that very easily and respond to their feedback very easily and quickly, and I don't worry too much about the database, especially, none of my issues have really been around that at all at this point. So
I'm very happy to hear that, and you don't have to worry about the database. That's my concern. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for showing up and discussing it with us. I think that was valuable on a lot of levels, if only because now I have a wholly different level of crazy for UI on the web, and it's really look fantastic. And thank you very much.
glad I could be here.
Okay. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.